Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Los Angeles International Airport buzzed with life, like an anthill with 1,000 trajectories. Announcements blared over the loudspeakers in several languages, interspersed with the cries of babies, nervous laughter, and the rolling clatter of hastily dragged suitcases. The floor glistened under the artificial light, and the smell of burnt coffee and duty-free perfumes hung in the air. Amidst the sea of people, a boy with a calm, serious expression cut through the crowd, clutching a threadbare backpack to his chest. Ethan Walker, 13, small for his age, walked with hesitant but determined steps. His oversized jacket had once belonged to his military uncle, and the soles of his shoes were worn down to the wire. His ticket, printed on a crumpled piece of paper, hung from his pocket like a talisman he checked every 5 minutes. He was traveling alone for the very first time. A few hours earlier, at the entrance to the terminal, his mother, Angela Walker, had hugged him with tears in her eyes. She was still wearing her nurse's scrubs, stained by fatigue and sleepless nights. "Be strong, my love. Grandma Helen will be so happy to see you." She had slipped a small notebook into the inside pocket of his jacket. "And remember what I taught you. Always help when you can, listen to your heart, and stay standing, even when everything is shaking." Ethan hadn't said much. He wasn't one for talking, but his silence was filled with love and promise. He didn't have a tablet, a console, or even the latest headphones. Just a few books, an apple, and the quiet strength of those who grow up quickly because they have no choice. He wasn't going on vacation. He was going to say goodbye to his grandmother, his second mother, bedridden in a hospice in the Bronx, whose cancer was gaining ground every day. At the other end of the terminal, in a private lounge lined with tinted glass, a whole other life was preparing for the same journey. Sitting in a white leather ergonomic chair, Madison Carter, 8 months pregnant, sipped lime-infused water. Looking a little lost, she gently caressed her rounded belly, where her future son was already moving. She was the wife of James Carter, tech mogul and CEO of Carter Tech, one of the richest and most influential men in America. But today, Madison was alone. Alone, despite the luxury, despite the millions. Her husband, preoccupied with a strategic summit in Dubai, had postponed her return yet again. She had refused the usual cohort of bodyguards, tired of being escorted like a celebrity under glass. For once, she wanted to feel normal. Invisible. Just another pregnant woman. Few people knew what she really looked like. James Carter had always made sure his wife stayed out of the press, and that suited her just fine. She wore a loose, cream-colored dress, large sunglasses, and a hastily tied bun. At first glance, she could have been a schoolteacher, an artist, or just a tired passenger. And yet, in her eyes, there was a discreet but powerful sparkle, that of women who, behind the apparent calm, bear the scars of a life too often crushed by the decisions of others. Everything separated her from Ethan: age, wealth, the world. But what neither of them knew yet was that their lives were about to collide at 30,000 feet, in a moment of truth that neither money, nor loneliness, nor even fate could prevent. Chance, or perhaps something bigger, placed them both aboard Delta Flight 385 from LAX to JFK. 3 hours after takeoff, Delta Flight 385 glided silently over the Great Plains of the Midwest. The sky was a clear blue, and the fluffy clouds seemed to float like suspended islands. In the main cabin, the dim lighting encouraged drowsiness. Soft snores punctuated the silence, interspersed with the occasional click of seatbelts and the whispers of flight attendants checking that everything was okay. Ethan, on the other hand, wasn't asleep. He was focused, immersed in a first aid manual, a small laminated booklet his mother had carefully slipped into his bag before he left. He knew every page. He was reading not to learn, but to reassure himself. Cuts, burns, respiratory arrest, emergency deliveries. He had seen everything again. "You never know," his mother had told him. "It's better to know what to do and never use it, than to know nothing when everything depends on you." Suddenly, a high-pitched scream pierced the silence from the first classroom. A piercing, human scream, laden with pain and panic. Ethan raised his head. The passengers awoke with a start. The curtains separating the classes quickly parted. Two flight attendants rushed to the front, and the overhead intercom crackled in a now tense silence. Is there a doctor on board? Repeat, a doctor or a healthcare professional, please come forward immediately. A shudder ran through the plane. Eyes turned, searching for someone to stand up. But no one moved. The intercom crackled again, the voice more urgent, more shaky. A pregnant passenger is showing signs of advanced labor. We need assistance immediately. Ethan felt his heart pounding so loudly he thought it could be heard. He looked down at the textbook, clutched it. Then he stood. His instincts urged him forward. His upbringing held him back. He hesitated, then took a deep breath, just as his mother had taught him, and walked briskly forward, ignoring the whispers and the surprised looks. A hostess intervened, her gaze worried. I am trained in first aid, he said in a calm but assured voice. My mother is a nurse. She taught me. I can help. Please. A brief moment of hesitation, then she gave in. The urgency left no room for pride. Ethan was led to the first-class cabin. Madison Carter lay across two seats pushed together, her face pale, her hands clenched on the armrests. Beads of sweat trickled down her temples. Her stomach visibly tightened beneath her loose dress. She gasped, her eyes wide with pain and fear. A flight attendant clumsily tried to calm her, while another frantically searched a compartment for napkins. Panic hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Ethan knelt gently beside her, put down his bag, and said in a low, almost whispered voice, Madam, I'm here. Breathe with me. It's going to be okay. You're not alone. He then addressed the hostesses with a calm authority that contrasted with his young age. You have to lay him on his left side for circulation. Do you have blankets? Towels? A pillow? He guided the flight crew with precision, improvising a pillow with a rolled-up jacket, placing towels under her, moistening her lips with water. He counted the contractions. Every 2 minutes. He knew. Labor was over. The captain, informed of the situation, announced an emergency landing in Chicago. But there were still 40 long minutes to go. A brutal contraction tore through Madison, who arched her back and screamed. I think it's coming. I can't take it anymore. She breathed, tears in her eyes. Ethan grabbed her hand. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was an anchor, a presence, a breath of courage. Look at me. You are strong. This baby wants to come now. We will welcome it together. You are not alone. A tearful hostess nodded. All eyes were on this boy with his sure gestures, whose calmness contrasted with the surrounding panic. And there, in the skies of America, at an altitude of 30,000 feet, without a doctor, without equipment, without certainty, a scream tore through the airspace. A little boy had just been born. Madison was shaking all over, exhausted but alive. The baby, wrapped in a makeshift blanket, was crying vigorously. Ethan held him in his arms, as if holding the world. The cabin erupted in applause. Some were crying. A passenger, a former midwife, had finally come to help in the final moments. But everyone knew that without Ethan, none of this would have been possible. And in Madison's still moist gaze, there was a silent gratitude. A bond had been born, stronger than blood, a debt of the soul. Upon landing, the wheels of the Boeing 787 abruptly hit the tarmac at Chicago International Airport, sending shock waves through the cabin. Passengers, still reeling from the shock, held their breath. As soon as the plane came to a stop, the medical teams rushed aboard, led by the flight attendants. Madison and her newborn, still snuggled together, were attended to with gentleness mixed with urgency. The baby was still crying, loud and healthy. Madison, exhausted, squeezed Ethan's hand one last time before being gently led away. Ethan, who had stayed behind, said nothing. His hands were shaking, stained with blood, sweat, and emotion. His t-shirt was wrinkled, damp from exertion and stress. He stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, even forgetting to grab his bag, his headphones, his jacket. His mind seemed suspended. A doctor rushed onto the tarmac and boarded to assess the situation. He briefly questioned the crew, then approached Ethan. Is that you? He asked, staring at him in astonishment. Ethan nodded shyly. The doctor knelt down, his gaze serious. You kept your cool. You made the right decisions. You saved 2 lives. If you hadn't been there, things could have turned out badly. But Ethan didn't answer. He stared at his hands as if he were seeing them for the first time. The news spread like wildfire. A mid-flight birth, a child's intervention. The plane had barely taxied to the jetway when whispers were already running through the airport corridors. Journalists waited, cameras on their shoulders, notepads in hand, sniffing out the incredible story that would make the front page. But what they didn't yet know was who they would write about. No one knew that the rescued woman was none other than Madison Carter, wife of the famous businessman James Carter, telecommunications magnate, and one of the most influential men in the country. 2 days later, in a light-filled private hospital suite, James Carter held his newborn son, wrapped in a pale blue blanket. His features, usually set in an almost icy severity, had softened. He stared at the child as if he couldn't believe his eyes. Sitting up in bed, Madison, still pale but her eyes bright, told him the story. Slowly, every detail, every gesture, every look the boy gave. A boy, James. His name is Ethan. She took a deep breath. Without him, I might not be here anymore. And neither would our son. James looked away. A sudden, unexpected lump of emotion tightened in his throat. He, who usually kept everything under control, felt overwhelmed by gratitude mixed with guilt. I want to see him, he breathed. I want to talk to him. Now, Ethan was found at a nearby hospital. In the commotion of the landing, he had twisted his ankle while descending the fire escape. The overwhelmed staff hadn't treated him immediately. Alone in a waiting room, an ice pack clumsily placed on his ankle, he stared at the television screen on the wall. The evening news was already broadcasting a live report. Images of his face, taken as he exited the plane, appeared between two headlines in capital letters. A child saves a pregnant woman on board a commercial flight. His eyes widened. He didn't realize it at first. Then he saw the baby. He saw Madison, blurry but smiling, carried onto a stretcher. And he understood. At that moment, the doors opened. James Carter entered, dressed in a dark suit, his figure erect and his gaze hard. 2 bodyguards flanked his imposing presence. Ethan stood up quickly, despite the pain. "I'm sorry if I did anything wrong, sir," he murmured, intimidated by this stature he recognized from the media. But to his surprise, James Carter knelt before him, a billionaire on his knees, in front of an unknown boy. "You didn't do anything wrong, Ethan," he said in a deep voice. "You saved the most precious thing in the world to me." He paused, slowly pulling a metal card out of his pocket. "Tell me what you want. A house, a fat bank account, a paid college education, a secure future? You deserve it. Tell me, and I'll make it happen." Ethan looked down. He seemed to be searching for the words. "I just want to—" He raised his head, his eyes wet but determined. "That my grandmother does not die alone." Silence. "She's sick. She raised me. She taught me to be like this. She's the one who taught me to help, to not panic, to believe that you can do something, even when you're little. I just want you to come see her with me. She deserves to know that what she taught me saved someone." James Carter stood there frozen. He had never heard such a pure, selfless request. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. A man who had everything, versus a child who only wanted one thing, the honor of a loving grandmother. He took a deep breath, his throat tight, then nodded. "So let's go, Ethan." Together. 3 days later, on a gray, humid morning in the Bronx, James Carter walked into a modest nursing home with Ethan in tow. The air was thick with the faint scent of disinfectant, mingling with the faint scent of flowers on the windowsills. The building looked tired, its cracked walls bearing the marks of time and silent struggles. Yet here, in this often forgotten neighborhood, life pulsed with a quiet, almost resilient intensity. James, dressed simply, worn jeans, a light-colored shirt with rolled-up sleeves, had momentarily abandoned the businessman's suit the world knew him for. His gaze, usually so imperturbable, was now gentle, attentive. In the bedroom, Mrs. Helen Walker, 78, lay in bed. Her face, marked by fatigue and the trials of terminal cancer, lit up with fragile surprise as she slowly opened her eyes. Ethan, a little out of breath with emotion, walked towards her. "Grandmother," he said softly, squeezing her wrinkled hand between his. Helen gave a weak smile. Then, beside her, James knelt down and placed his hand on Helen's, with respectful delicacy. "Madam Walker," he began, his voice filled with a rare sincerity, "your grandson saved my life. He saved my son's. I wanted to say thank you, in person." Tears, slow and silent, rolled down Helen's cheeks. Her bright gaze fell first on Ethan, then on James. In that simple, fragile moment, In the very heart of the Bronx, a billionaire discovered what inheritance truly meant. Not a fortune, not a name, but a legacy of love, courage, and humanity passed down from generation to generation. A few weeks later, in a light-filled auditorium, before a select audience of journalists and guests, James Carter took the stage. He held in his arms the little boy, the same one he had seen being born on an airplane. The boy whose bravery and compassion had transcended all social barriers. Today, James announced with palpable emotion, "I am proud to launch the Walker Foundation in tribute to Helen and Ethan." He paused, looking at the audience, then continued, "This foundation's mission is to train young people from disadvantaged neighborhoods in first aid. Because sometimes, a simple gesture can save a life. Because courage doesn't depend on the bank account, but on the heart and the will to act." In front of the cameras, under the flashes of the cameras, he concludes, "This boy reminded me that true courage is not found in wealth or technology, but in simple gestures, selfless acts, and love passed down from one generation to the next." Ethan, shy but proud, smiled as he shook his unlikely mentor's hand. Together, they had written a story that went far beyond titles and fortunes, a story of rediscovered humanity, of hope, and of passing on knowledge.